Hey guys, tonight we drift back to a world where poetry was etched into damp clay, where the greatest insult was "May your beer be forever warm," and where one mostly forgotten wordsmith lived a life so ordinary it's perfect for sleep. You're in Mesopotamia, around 2100 BCE, a city buzzing with the world's first tax collectors, sacred prostitutes, and enough bureaucratic tablets to crush a man's foot if they toppled wrong. Speaking of which, you probably won't survive this era. Between the dysentery, the occasional invading Elamite, and the sheer existential dread of realizing you're just another laborer in the world's first functioning bureaucracy. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time. Let's see who's listening from a cozy bed in Oslo or a midnight commute in Tokyo. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air is thick with the scent of baking bread, donkey dung, and the ever-present tang of the Euphrates. Imagine a river that's equal parts lifeblood and open sewer. You're not royalty, not a warrior, not even a particularly successful merchant. You're a poet, or at least, you're trying to be. The sun hasn't yet crested the ziggurat steps, but already the city groans awake. Somewhere a priest is chanting, a potter is cursing a cracked vessel, and a dog is stealing someone's breakfast. Your sandals slap against mud brick as you weave through streets barely wider than your shoulders. Around you, laborers haul baskets of grain. Taxes, always taxes. Children dart after scorpions for reasons best left unexplored. And a particularly ambitious rat drags a piece of bread twice its size. Historians still argue whether Sumerians loved or hated their mornings. The records are mostly complaints about barley quotas, so it's hard to say. You reach the scribal quarter, where the real magic happens. Here, men and the occasional woman, though nobody talks about her, press wedge-shaped marks into clay, recording everything from epic myths to laundry lists. One tablet famously reads, 3 sheep delivered, 1 sheep questionable. The shepherd has trust issues. Poetry, this is not. But you're here for something grander, or at least you hope to be. Today, you'll attempt your first commissioned piece, 4 lines praising the governor's new well. The reed stylus feels awkward in your hand, like trying to write with a chicken bone. Around you, a dozen other students press wedge after wedge into damp clay tablets, their brows furrowed in concentration. This is temple school, where future scribes are forged through equal parts discipline and despair. Your teacher, a man whose beard could house a family of sparrows, paces between the rows, occasionally pausing to smack a wrist with his measuring rod. Straight lines, he barks. The gods demand straight lines. You glance down at your latest attempt. What was supposed to be the symbol for barley looks more like a drunken spider. Historians still argue whether Sumerian education was rigorous or just brutal. One surviving tablet complains of a student being caned for poor penmanship, then billed for the reed he ruined. The classroom stinks of wet clay, sweat, and the unmistakable tang of fear. Across from you, a boy named Enlo Mansum, who will one day become a mid-level bureaucrat and die of boredom, whispers, "Psst, the answer for problem 7 is 16 bushels. You nod gratefully, then realize you're on problem 4. Your fingers cramp. Your back aches. The stool you're sitting on has one leg shorter than the others, giving you the posture of a question mark. But this is your path, the only way out of your father's shadow. He's a moderately successful date merchant who thinks poetry is a nice hobby for people who don't like eating. At midday, you're released for lunch. Flatbread, onions, and a dubious fish paste that may or may not have been currency at some point. As you chew, you watch the temple scribes at work, real professionals, their hands flying across tablets like birds pecking at grain. One is composing a love poem. Another is itemizing temple livestock. One spotted goat, temperament, uncooperative. A shadow falls over you. It's your teacher. Your wedges are crooked, he says, not unkindly. But your metaphors show promise. If you live past 20, you might not embarrass us completely. It's the closest thing to praise you'll get all year. The governor's new latrine is, by any reasonable standard, just a hole in the ground with some fancy bricks around it. But in even sewage can be sacred if you spin it right. Your first commission, 4 lines of verse celebrating this architectural marvel, is due by sunset. And so far, all you've got is, "O noble privy, where the air hangs thick as temple incense." You scratch that last part out. Too honest. Nearby, laborers slather wet mortar between bricks while arguing about whether the new design will actually prevent collapses. Spoiler, it won't. One of them pauses to wipe his brow, leaving a gray streak that makes him look like a half-finished statue. "Poet," he calls. "Make sure you mention the ventilation shafts." The last one didn't have ventilation shafts. You nod solemnly, as if this were a matter for the ages. Historians still argue whether Sumerian sanitation verse was satire or sincere. Some of these odes read like they're one misplaced metaphor away from being treason. The famous hymn to the night soil collector walks this line perfectly, praising its subjects' strong arms and stronger stomach, while somehow avoiding execution. You bite your lip, stylus hovering, inspiration strikes. From the earth it rises, a tower of comfort and dignity. No, too grand. When nature calls, answer here, where the bricks are smooth and the drafts are few. Better. You're aiming for something between royal propaganda and a 5-star review. A shadow falls across your tablet. It's the governor's steward, a man whose expression suggests he smelled something unpleasant, possibly your first draft. His Excellency expects elegance, he says, but also brevity, and no mention of incidents. You glance at the laborers, who suddenly find the ground very interesting. Right. No mention of the incidents. By dusk you've carved 8 versions into clay, settling on, "O house of ease, where even kings might pause and sigh." Firm are your walls, swift your drainage, and sweet the peace you offer. It's not your masterpiece, but it pays enough to buy a decent meal and a new stylus. As you walk home, a thought occurs. If your words outlive these bricks, does that make you the real architect? Probably not, but it's nice to imagine. The priestess of Inanna doesn't laugh at your poetry. She doesn't sigh dreamily or clutch her chest in admiration either. She squints at the clay tablet you just handed her, tilts her head, and says, "Is this meant to be a metaphor for plowing?" Your stomach drops. This was supposed to be your masterpiece, a lyrical exploration of love's fleeting nature, woven with imagery of ripe dates and spring floods. But now that she mentions it, yes, it does sound suspiciously agricultural. "It's abstract," you mutter, reaching to take the tablet back. She holds it just out of reach, one eyebrow arched. The part about tilling the fertile earth was especially evocative. Her mouth twitches. Is she mocking you? Flirting? It's impossible to tell. Priestess training includes a course in enigmatic expressions. Historians still argue whether temple priestesses were allowed romantic entanglements, or if your entire courtship attempt was doomed from the start. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Sacred vows didn't stop some, but this particular priestess seems more interested in the accountant behind you, who's currently reciting tax rates with the passion others reserve for love ballads. "You're sweet," she says finally, handing back the tablet. But I prefer numbers. Numbers don't compare my hips to irrigation channels. The walk of shame back to your quarters takes you past the temple gardens, where actual couples whisper under date palms. One man is reciting poetry far worse than yours, yet his listener swoons. Life isn't fair. That night, you drown your sorrows in the universal solace of ancient Mesopotamia. Suspiciously strong beer. The tavern keeper, a woman with biceps like river stones, slides you a third bowl and says what passes for comfort in priestesses, always looking for a man who can calculate interest rates. You're better off. You're not, but the beer helps. The tavern reeks of fermented barley, roasted garlic, and the unmistakable musk of bad decisions. You're perched on a wobbly stool, clutching a clay bowl of something that's either beer or vinegar, with delusions of grandeur. Hard to say after the third serving. Around you, merchants argue over tariffs, off-duty soldiers brag about battles that definitely didn't happen, and a very determined fly circles your ear like it's trying to deliver a message from the underworld. This is your stage. The tavern keeper bangs a spoon against a copper pot. "Oi, the poet's gonna perform," she announces, as if anyone asked. A few heads turn. One man belches encouragingly. You clear your throat and begin the epic of the tax collector's mule, a crowd favorite, mostly because it ends with the mule kicking the bureaucrat into a canal. Halfway through, you improvise a verse about the mule's unyielding spirit, much like the common man, and a potter in the back starts weeping into his beer. "That's me," he slurs. "Unyielding spirit." His friend pats his shoulder, then steals his bread. Historians still argue whether tavern poetry was a respected art form, or just drunk people shouting at each other in meter. The truth? Probably both. You've seen hardened traders weep at a well-turned metaphor about lost cargo, then punch a wall over a disputed dice roll 5 minutes later. The tavern keeper slides you another bowl, payment in liquid form. "You're getting better." She lies. "Last time, NC Haddo over there cried so hard he forgot to pay his tab." She nods toward the now sobbing potter. "Do the one about the fisherman's wife again." You oblige. By the time you reach the scandalous bit about the squid, even the fly seems invested. The moon god Nana's statue has never blinked before. You're mid-recital in the temple courtyard, delivering what you hoped would be your big break, the celestial shepherd's lament, a real tearjerker about divine loneliness, when the alabaster lips of the god's effigy twitch. Just slightly. Just enough to make you stumble over the next line. A hush falls over the assembled priests and nobles. Someone in the back drops a dates platter. The clatter echoes like a portent. You press on, voice wavering only a little. "O Nana," whose tears fall as evening dew. Then it happens. A sound. A tiny, unmistakable snicker from the divine statue itself. The high priest's face goes the color of unbaked clay. A junior acolyte faints dramatically into the arms of a guard. You stand there, stylus hovering over your tablet, wondering if you've accidentally invented blasphemy. Historians still argue whether this was a genuine divine intervention, a clever prank by disgruntled temple workers, or just really bad acoustics. The official record will claim it was a trick of the oil lamps, but you saw what you saw. The governor's steward grabs your elbow. Perhaps, he hisses, we omit the comedic elements when addressing celestial beings. You want to protest that there were no comedic elements. This was supposed to be your most solemn work yet, but the damage is done. As you're ushered out, you catch the statue's stone eye glinting in the torchlight. Was that a wink? That night, back in your cramped quarters, you draft 2 versions of tomorrow's apology poem. One groveling, one defiant. The third version, "So, you think you're funny, huh?" A ballad for chuckling deities. You burn immediately. Some jokes even the moon god might not forgive. The marsh reeds whisper treason as you wade through waist-deep water, your sandals long since sacrificed to the sucking mud. This is exile, not some grand banishment with trumpets and proclamations, but a quiet suggestion from the temple steward that a change of air might benefit your unique perspective. Translation: write one more poem about giggling gods, and the next statue that moves might be throwing something. Your new neighbors are marsh folk who build houses on floating reed platforms and look at you like you're the strange one. Their children follow you in silent canoes, waiting to see if the city poet will do something interesting, like drown. Historians still argue whether Sumerian exile was meant to be punitive or inspirational. After all, the marshes birthed their earliest myths. But right now, with a mosquito humming the song of your people directly into your ear canal, it feels very much like punishment.
You try to work. Really, you do. But your stylus keeps slipping in the humid air, turning elegant couplets into cuneiform gibberish. A passing fisherman peers at your latest attempt and says, "That looks like the symbol for eel, but also maybe regret." The marsh offers its own poetry, though. At sunset, when the water turns to liquid copper and the herons stab at fish with the precision of seasoned assassins, you almost understand why the gods chose this place to create mankind. Then your buttocks brush against something suspiciously soft in the water, and the moment passes. That night, as you scratch mosquito bites with one hand and attempt to write with the other, a realization dawns. No one here cares about proper meter or temple approval. For the first time, you could write whatever you want. The poem that emerges is terrible, but it's yours. The reed boat glides through the pre-dawn mist like a thief, which technically it is. You recognize the silhouette of your own stolen poems even from this distance. The distinctive curve of your lament for a broken oar. The telltale spacing of 7 reasons your goat hates you. That bastard Enkidu, your rival scribe from temple school, has not only stolen your best work, he's had the audacity to perform it at the governor's summer banquet. Your marsh-dwelling accomplice, a woman who introduces herself only as the one who knows where the bodies are, rows with quiet precision. "We'll hit his workshop at sunrise," she murmurs. "He'll be hungover from last night's triumph." Historians still argue whether literary theft was a capital offense in Ur. Some tablets suggest plagiarists had their hands cut off, while others implied it was just considered rude. Either way, you're not here for justice. You're here for clay. The raid is swift and undignified. Enkidu, sprawled across his sleeping mat with a wine stain shaped like regret, doesn't stir as you gather your stolen tablets. His own original works lie scattered about, mostly accounting ledgers and a truly terrible love poem titled "Your Eyes Like Well-Mulched Fields." You consider smashing it on principle. Then you see it, beneath a pile of receipts for sacrificial goats. A fresh tablet bears your handwriting, but not your words. It's a sequel to your ode to the leaky irrigation ditch. Except now the ditch is a metaphor for man's futile struggle against entropy. It's not bad. Your marsh guide hisses from the doorway. You hesitate, then tuck the stolen sequel into your belt. Plagiarism works both ways. The governor's sandal squelches with every other step, a wet, rhythmic complaint against the universe. You've been trailing this sound through palace corridors for half an hour, waiting for the perfect moment to present your redemption. An ode to the leakiest irrigation ditch in Ur, and the man who endures it. His steward eyes you warily. Last time, that was theological satire, you interrupt. This is agricultural praise, totally different genre. When the governor pauses to wring out his sock, you strike. Your recital begins with the ditch's noble persistence and ends with a startlingly vivid metaphor about the governor's patience being deeper than the aquifer. Halfway through, the squelching stops. He's listening. Historians still argue whether Sumerian rulers genuinely appreciated flattery or just enjoyed having their misery validated. Either way, by the time you compare his waterlogged sandal to the tears of grateful crops, the steward is nodding approvingly. "You've matured," the governor says finally. Then with terrifying casualness,
The northern grain storage needs an inventory poem.
"Can you make accounting sound heroic?"
You can. You will. You must.
As you exit, already composing couplets about wheat yields in your head,
You pass a certain priestess arm in arm with her accountant.
he's reciting something about optimized seed distribution ratios. She looks enthralled.
Some wounds never fully heal.
But as the palace scribes hand you a fresh stack of clay and a stylus that hasn't been chewed by marsh rodents,
You realize something.
you're getting paid to compare a bureaucrat to rainfall. This might just be happiness. Death pays well in You found your niche composing laments for wealthy merchants' funerals. A growth industry given the local plagues, occasional invasions, and that suspiciously popular spiced shellfish stall in the market. Your latest masterpiece, He Was Okay, I Guess, a eulogy for shipowner Nungal, earns you enough silver to buy a new cloak and a lifelong aversion to shellfish. The bereaved widow dabs her eyes with a lace-trimmed linen handkerchief. "You made him sound almost noble," she sniffles. You tactfully ignore how she's already moved her lover into the house, the same strapping sailor who comforted her in her grief during your consultation. Historians still argue whether professional mourners were respected artists or just emotionally exploitative performance artists. The truth? A little of both. You've seen families weep genuine tears at your words, then immediately haggle over your fee like they're buying a donkey. Business booms until the day a distraught daughter demands a refund.
Your poem said my father walked with the righteousness of the gods, she hisses, shoving a tablet under your nose.
Then we found his secret second family in Larsa.
You cough. Poetic license?
The ensuing scandal sends you back to safer topics, namely, inanimate objects.
Ode to a well-behaved plow.
Sonnet for a particularly symmetrical jar.
The pay is worse, but at least clay jars don't have angry relatives.
The grain silo's inventory records stretch before you in endless, mind-numbing columns. Year 3 of King Amarsin's reign, 2,870 bushels of barley, 1,203 of emmer wheat, 47 of something labeled miscellaneous grains, do not eat during eclipse. You've been counting, recounting, and versifying these numbers for 11 months. Your latest work, The Ballad of the Missing Bushel, was met with stony silence from the temple accountants. Your stylus hovers over a fresh tablet. You should be drafting the annual harvest hymn. Instead, you've drawn a surprisingly accurate caricature of the high priest with donkey ears. Historians still argue whether your so-called silent years were creative burnout, bureaucratic oppression, or just the inevitable result of that time you tried to ferment date wine in your sandal. The truth? All three.
The only poetry you write these days are passive-aggressive notes to your roommate. Whoever took the last of the lentil spew, may the gods give them indigestion. Even the tavern keeper has noticed your absence. We got a new poet, she tells you when you finally visit. He mostly does drinking songs about tax evasion. It's not the same. You stare into your beer. It stares back, cloudy and judgmental. Somewhere in the marshes, your stolen sequel poem is probably being read aloud to appreciative frogs. That night, you dream in accounting tables, rows upon rows of numbers, marching endlessly toward a horizon that looks suspiciously like a giant clay tablet. When you wake, there's a single word scratched into your bedroom wall. Right. You're not sure if it's divine inspiration or you sleep carving again. Either way, it's the most interesting thing you've done in a year.
The date palm shakes violently, raining fruit onto the temple courtyard as the possessed farmer clings to its trunk, howling in a voice that is definitely not human. "I am the demon of spoiled dates," he bellows. "My power is the writhing maggot in the sweetest fruit." You clutch your freshly commissioned exorcism poem like a shield. The high priest had said this would be simple liturgical work. A misunderstanding that now hangs in the air like the stench of overripe fruit. "Begin the recitation," shouts the junior priest, who is wisely standing behind a pillar. You clear your throat and begin your incantation against fruit-blighting spirits, which you'd adapted from an old laundry list chant. Halfway through the line, "Begone, O wretched fermenter of juices untimely," the demon pauses its thrashing to squint at you. "Is this iambic?" it asks, in a disturbingly conversational tone. Historians still argue whether ancient exorcisms relied more on ritual power or sheer theatricality. Right now, with a supernatural entity critiquing your meter, you're voting for the latter. You ad-lib a verse about the demon's mother being a poorly cured olive. This proves surprisingly effective. With a sulfurous pop, the farmer drops from the tree, groaning. The high priest declares it a miracle. You know better. It was the world's first recorded instance of comedy exorcism. Your payment includes 3 amphoras of blessed dates. They're already fermenting. Some battles never truly end. The cut was so small, you barely felt it. Just a whisper of papyrus across your thumb as you unrolled the latest Egyptian import. Now, 3 days later, your hand resembles an overripe fig, and the physician has that solemn expression priests reserve for particularly disappointing sacrificial goats. It's the god's irony, you croak, watching the redness creep up your wrist, a poet slain by stationery. Your apprentice, a pimpled youth who still believes in artistic glory, frantically scribbles down your every word. "Master, your last poem, should it be called Farewell to the Living or Ode to a Stubborn Infection?" You'd laugh if it didn't hurt so much. The infection poem is your first hit in years. A raw, feverish thing scribbled between chills. It's already being copied and sold in the market, though the versions circulating have suspiciously happier endings. Historians still argue whether your death marked the end of an era or was just another Tuesday in Mesopotamia. The truth? Both. Your will keep turning without you, grain counted, ditches dug, bad poetry written. But somewhere, a marsh girl sings your stolen sequel to the reeds. A tavern keeper recites your mule epic between pores. Even the priestess of Inanna might, in unguarded moments, smile at that terrible agricultural love poem. The physician administers a poultice of crushed garlic and crocodile dung. It stings like all your regrets. "More metaphors," you whisper, as darkness creeps in. The good Egyptian papyrus was worth it. 8 centuries pass in the blink of an eye. Your poems, the good, the bad, the frankly embarrassing, lie buried beneath collapsed ziggurat bricks, sandwiched between tax records and someone's grocery list. Termites nibble at your ode to the leaky ditch, their digestive enzymes performing the world's slowest literary critique. Floodwaters come and go, leaving your words slightly blurred, but still legible, like a drunkard's final coherent thought. In the world above, empires rise and fall. Hammurabi's laws are carved in stone. The entire concept of wheeled vehicles gets reinvented 3 times. Your name, never famous to begin with, vanishes completely, though a particularly perceptive scholar in 612 BCE will pause over a fragment of your tavern poetry and chuckle
before using it to level a wobbly table.
Historians still argue whether cultural preservation is deliberate or accidental. Right now, as a Persian soldier's latrine trench narrowly misses your incantation against fruit demons, the answer seems clear. The world saves what it needs, discards what it doesn't, and occasionally uses genius as landfill. The termites, at least, are devoted fans. The 19th century archaeologist sneezes violently, sending a cloud of dust and cuneiform fragments into the Baghdad sun. "Blast this desert air," mutters Professor Woolley, wiping his nose on a sleeve already crusted with 2 millennia of history. His trowel had struck something moments before, a cache of tablets buried beneath what was once a tavern or possibly a brothel, the line being famously thin in One particular fragment catches the light. Your epic of the tax collector's mule, now reduced to 6 kiabame kodal and a suspicious stain, sticks to the professor's damp palm as if demanding to be read. He squints. Interesting. This appears to be some sort of comedic. A wind stirs across the dig site. Somewhere, a donkey brays with perfect comedic timing. The professor laughs, a full, unexpected sound that makes his assistant stare. The translation will come later, with footnotes and academic debates about Sumerian humor constructs. But in this moment, something of you endures, not your name, not your face, just that rarest of things, a joke that still lands after 4,000 years.